Can you believe that the woman from the association had the only bridge leading to my sister's house knocked down, as if she owned the lake, the island, the world? You know that phrase, "It's like something out of a movie"? Well, I never thought that one day I'd live through a script worthy of a detective series, with an isolated island, a blown-up bridge, and a woman who thinks she owns the lake, the forest, and the patience of others. But it happened. And it wasn't in a lawless country or a God-forsaken village. It was here, in the backyard of the American dream, where the most dangerous thing should be a raccoon rummaging through the garbage. My sister, ever since she was a little girl, always dreamed of having her own corner, away from the hustle and bustle, a quiet person, the kind who collects plants, talks to birds, and even finds ants carrying leaves funny. She managed to buy a plot of land on a small island in the middle of a lake that borders the community where I live. The only link to the mainland was a wooden bridge that my brother-in-law built with the help of some engineer friends. And look, it was sturdier than a lot of viaducts out there. Beautiful, safe, charming, a postcard. The bridge didn't cut through anyone's path. It didn't get in the way of boats. It didn't pollute anything visually. It just stood there, discreetly, fulfilling its function. But you know who didn't think so? The president of the Residents Association. She thought the bridge broke the natural harmony of the lake, that the structure caused an unauthorized environmental impact, that it was not in keeping with the aesthetic standards of the community. And then the circus began. At first, it was the same old talk, a little note left on my doorstep. Then a polite warning at an association meeting. Nobody paid any attention, because nobody saw anything wrong with the bridge. But this woman has a special talent for turning nothing into an institutional crisis. And, of course, like any good neighborhood tyrant, she needed a crusade. And the bridge became the target. My sister, poor thing, wasn't even part of the association. The island was technically out of her jurisdiction. But the woman insisted that the bridge connected to an area of community interest and could therefore be analyzed by the committee. The committee was made up of her husband, and her friend, who lives in colorful leggings and malicious gossip. Little by little, the pressure grew. A notice here, another there. Then came the threats of fines. The claim that the bridge didn't have an installation license, as if it were a dam or a transmission tower. And the most bizarre thing, the woman started appearing at the edge of the lake with binoculars. Yes, binoculars. She stood there for hours, observing, taking notes, measuring with a portable laser tape measure, as if he were about to dismantle an illegal maritime smuggling scheme. And the most infuriating thing was that nobody but her seemed to care. The neighborhood went about its routine. The ducks swam in peace. The fishermen threw bait a few meters from the bridge without the slightest disturbance. Only she saw a problem. Only she felt that it threatened the community's world order. And the more she was ignored, the crazier she became. Then, one day, it happened. It was a Thursday morning. Clear skies, calm water. My sister called me, crying. And my sister is not one to cry. The woman was in shock because the bridge, the only link between her house and civilization, had been destroyed, knocked down, reduced to pieces floating in the lake. There had been no storm, no accident. It was sabotage, deliberate, cold, and meticulously planned. The structure had been cut with surgical precision. It wasn't amateurish. Someone went there in the middle of the night with their own equipment and dismantled everything. And of course, guess who, coincidentally, made a complaint about the bridge on the very same day? Yes, the woman. At the same time that my sister woke up stranded, she claimed that the bridge had been removed for safety reasons. She said that the association had taken an emergency decision, but no one from the board was consulted. The document she presented as justification was a poorly printed page with a visibly forged signature and her own house stamp. The woman had literally fabricated a legal opinion at home using word art and recycled paper. My sister was trapped. No way out. Without enough food. no strong cell phone signal. She had to wave a white cloth at a random fisherman passing by on the lake. It looked like a scene from a war movie. I ran to the shore, and when I looked at it all, I understood. It was no longer possible to treat it as neighborhood madness. It was a crime. It was sabotage. It was an attack on sanity. And I told them, it won't stay that way. But she laughed, hard, as if to say, good luck. The woman thought she was untouchable, covering everything with the shield of community interest. But she forgot one small detail. The bridge was on a federal lake, and my sister's land, registered as an isolated property outside the association's jurisdiction. She had crossed the line, and if she wanted to play authority, I was going to call in someone who really understands the subject, because there was no more dealing with little letters. It was time to bring in people with badges and black briefcases. There are people who think that the height of madness for a residents' association is to have the sidewalk painted a standard color or to ban Christmas ornaments with flashing lights. But even these stories lose their force when you see a woman literally destroying a bridge on her own orders, as if she were leading a military operation in Ukraine. And what's worse, she thinks she's right, that she's doing a public service, that she's, I don't know, an environmental heroine who prevents clandestine passages to Eden. After the episode involving the destruction of the bridge, my sister spent 2 days unable to leave the island. 2 days. This in a country where so much is said about individual freedom and private property, as if it were a holy grail. What she experienced was a kidnapping disguised as an administrative action, because when someone takes away your only access to civilization, you're not isolated, you're imprisoned. The woman, for her part, walked around the neighborhood as if she had won a prize. She greeted people with that plastic smile, the kind that says, I'm on top, take it. All she had to do was hand out flyers with a photo of the bridge being destroyed and the words, mission accomplished, for a more harmonious community. Her problem wasn't with the bridge. It never was. It was with the idea that someone had something without her permission. The bridge was just a symbol of what she couldn't control. And people like that, when they feel they're not in charge, freak out. She wanted to be the invisible hand that regulates everything. Only instead of Adam Smith, she was just a busybody with a file folder and a superiority complex. At first, I admit, I thought I'd take the low road, talk to a lawyer, sue the condominium, demand repairs, but all that would take weeks, and my sister was isolated now, which made me go for something more direct, immediate action, because if she could act on her own and pretend it was on behalf of the community, then I could respond on the same level, by calling people who don't have time for neighborhood power plays. I managed, through an acquaintance who works in federal security, to call in an environmental and property investigation team that acts in cases of improper intervention in areas registered as federal territory. The lake where the bridge was installed was part of a national preservation map, and, therefore, any alteration without permission could be considered an environmental crime or an invasion of jurisdiction. Bingo! In less than 48 hours, 3 agents arrived in the city. No fanfare, no sirens, no vests shouting FBI. They looked more like university professors than investigators, but what they lacked in drama, they made up for in method. They measured the site, did a drone survey, took photos of the base of the destroyed bridge, took reports, talked to the local Coast Guard, all without haste, because if you know what you're doing, there's no need to rush. And then came the moment that is worth every second of this story. The woman was summoned to give an informal statement. Nothing aggressive, nothing that sounded like an interrogation, just a conversation about recent actions that have impacted the passage structure on the lake. She went in thinking she was going to shine, that she was going to put on a show, that she was going to show how efficient she was at protecting the aesthetics of the site. But the mask fell off in less than 5 minutes. She handed over a folder containing documents. And that's when the agents started asking simple questions. Who authorized it? Where is the technical report? Which engineers signed the risk report? Which company carried out the removal? What safety protocol was adopted? It stalled, literally. She tried to wriggle out of it, said it was an emergency action authorized by the common sense of the management committee, which in practice only existed inside her own garage. It became clear to everyone that she had no authorization whatsoever, that everything had been decided and executed on the basis of personal tantrums and delusions of authority. She couldn't even explain how the bridge had been taken down. It was removed with equipment, she said, as if that explained anything. What she didn't expect was that the agents had already talked to the boatman who saw the nighttime movement of a group with industrial tools and an unmarked truck, the kind of thing you can't improvise. In other words, she hired someone undercover to do the dirty work. That night, an official notice was delivered to her door. An investigation had been opened for destruction of property in a federal area, misuse of a community resource without consent, and possible falsification of a public document. The silence she maintained for the next few days was almost poetic. Not even her dog barked. The woman disappeared. She disappeared from her daily walks, from her makeshift observation post on the association's deck. Nobody saw the president for a week. Meanwhile, a new bridge began to be rebuilt, this time with legal authorization, support from the community, now duly informed of the insanity, and above all, with reinforced materials. Because we didn't just rebuild the bridge, we reinforced it to withstand any future attempts at sabotage. Now, in addition to a bridge, there were cameras, and around the island, buoys signaling that the area was private, forbidden, untouchable. She thought that destroying the bridge was the end of the story, but little did she know that, for someone who messes with the wrong person, this kind of gesture is only the beginning. Her silence was suspicious, and it wasn't just any silence. It was that silence that comes after a storm, when everyone is waiting for the next thunderclap, but it doesn't come. The woman who used to parade around with a clipboard under her arm and the face of a trustee from hell was now missing, locked up at home, as if she had discovered that the world was more complicated than the association meetings. But that disappearance didn't mean surrender. I knew that people like that don't give up easily. Their ego is too big. Their sense of protagonism is inflated like a rich kid's party balloon. And when they are confronted with real authority, the kind that doesn't bend to a neighbor's whim, they don't relent. They back down. They feign a strategic retreat, like a soap opera villain who disappears for a few episodes only to return with an even more absurd plan. During this period of hibernation, the neighborhood breathed. It was as if the atmospheric pressure had dropped. Children started playing in the street again without fear of being warned for noise. Neighbors exchanged recipes on the sidewalk. Even the grumpy man at the end of the street, who hated everyone, appeared sunbathing with his shirt open, as if he had started to believe in humanity again. Everything seemed to be getting back on track. The new bridge was finished in record time. It was beautiful. The varnished wood reflected in the lake, like paint. The handrail was reinforced, the base even more solid than before. My sister, who at first was still suspicious, as if the ground was going to disappear again at any moment, finally slept peacefully again. I began to think that maybe, just maybe, the woman had learned her lesson. But, of course, that would be too easy. And she wasn't made of that kind of material. What she did was even more pathetic. She tried to victimize herself. She tried to become the martyr of the misunderstood community. She sent a general letter, unsigned, claiming that she was being unfairly persecuted by larger forces that didn't understand the true mission of preserving the neighborhood. Look at the level. The woman thought she was so important that she turned her own punishment for federal vandalism into a conspiracy plot. The letter had an almost messianic tone. It talked about personal sacrifice in the name of order, deconstruction of oppressive structures, and other nonsense worthy of a philosophy student in a power surge. She spoke of the bridge as if it were a monument of threat, as if my sister's only link to the mainland was, I don't know, a gate to hell about, to unleash all the woes of the modern world. Colored curtains, polka dot umbrellas, and, God forbid, electric scooters. The community, which was already saturated with this woman's inventions, ignored it. But what she didn't expect was that the people now had a voice. For the first time in years, the majority of residents began to question the association's protocols. They started asking for open meetings, demanding records, documents, accountability. A small administrative riot broke out, and then it began to really lose control. Unable to shout orders, unable to issue warnings for tall grass or Christmas lights out of season, she found herself trapped in her own game. Because when you build your empire on fear, sham bureaucracy, and the appearance of authority, all it takes is a breath of reality for everything to crumble. And the blow came in the form of an audit. The association, under pressure from an increasingly organized group of residents, decided to review all the decisions made in recent years. Every fine, every warning, every emergency action taken by the association was put on the scale. And what emerged was a trail of authoritarianism, forgeries, and abuse of office. A veritable administrative horror show. She tried to challenge it, of course. She sent inflammatory emails, threatened to sue anyone who publicized her actions, said she was being defamed by a plot driven by internal political interests. The woman thought she was in an episode of House of Cards, but the reality was just a group of parents and pensioners wanting to plant hydrangeas without asking permission. The end of the line came when the investigating officers returned with an official report. They confirmed that the old bridge had been destroyed with tools that required access to industrial equipment. The company responsible, hired irregularly by her, on the side, with money that nobody knew where it came from, was notified. And guess what? It didn't have a permit. It didn't have a license. It was all on the basis of, do me a favor there, quickly. Based on this report, the bombshell came. She was formally indicted for destroying private property in an area of federal domain and using community funds without authorization. The association, as a passive accomplice, was also charged and forced to pay a fine, which led all the members to resign on the same day, like rats jumping out of a leaky boat. And then came the scene I'd been waiting for all along. The morning after the notification, she was seen leaving the neighborhood. Suitcases in the car, sunglasses on, defeated expression. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She didn't look around. She didn't leave a note. She just disappeared. The woman who once walked around as if she were mayor of the neighborhood left through the back door of her own tyranny, defeated by a crowd of ordinary people who were tired of putting up with the crazy antics of someone who mistook coordination for control. My sister? She's still on the island, with the bridge firm, the plants growing, the birds returning. And me? Well, I'm just watching everything with the peace of mind of someone who has won a war they never asked to fight, but which, when it started, they made a point of seeing through to the end. She left as she came, without warning, without ceremony, without consideration. The kind of person who always thought that the world revolved around her, that any step outside the script was a threat to order, that every yard with a hammock was hiding a rebellion. The queen of the can't, of the made-up rule, of the anonymous complaint written in Times New Roman size 14, simply evaporated. The neighborhood fell silent, and not that uncomfortable, tense silence. It was a good, light, breathable silence. The silence of someone who has taken a stone out of their shoe after weeks of pretending that everything was fine. Of course, no one celebrated publicly. That kind of victory you keep in your chest and savor quietly. But you could see it. The neighbor who never spoke to anyone showed up handing out homemade lemonade. The couple who had been at war once again walked hand in hand. Those little things that, even if you don't notice them right away, dissolve when a bitter person takes up too much space. Because that's what people like that do. They contaminate. They don't need to shout. They just have to be there, imposing rules in a sweet voice, smiling as they strangle you slowly. After she disappeared, the association was reformulated. A new group took over, this time made up of normal people. People who understand the difference between looking after the community and controlling the lives of others. And one of the first measures was to abolish all the absurdities she had implemented. They canceled the outstanding fines, reevaluated all the warnings, and finally made room for the residents to decide together what really mattered. And surprise, nobody thought a wooden bridge in the middle of the lake was a problem. No one saw any threat in birds, flowers, colorful chairs, or children making noise in the late afternoon. My sister's bridge became a symbol. It became an inside joke, a postcard for the neighborhood group. Some even suggested putting a sign on it with the words, "Rebuilt by popular will, inaccessible to madness." But my sister preferred something simpler, a wooden flower carved into the railing with her and her husband's initials. Discreet, beautiful, peaceful. The exact opposite of the woman who tried to tear it down by force. As for her, no one knows for sure where she ended up. Rumor has it that she tried to take on another leadership position in a luxury condominium in the neighboring town, but was barred from the first meeting when she started handing out cards with preliminary guidelines for coexistence. Another version says that she moved to a remote farm, where she now lives with 3 cats and a vegetable garden which, ironically, cannot be monitored by anyone. Perhaps there she has found what she was looking for, a place where she can be in charge without being contradicted, even if her only subordinates are carrots and lettuce plants. But deep down, the truth doesn't even matter, because that kind of person doesn't disappear. They reappear in another street, another city, another context, dressed in something else, perhaps more subtle, more smiling, but always with the same desire, to control the world around them because their own internal world is too unruly. And that's why stories like this need to be told, not to laugh, although it makes you want to, not to exalt the chaos, although it is tasty, but to remind us that sometimes the only way to combat institutionalized insanity is with direct confrontation, without fear, without lowering our heads. I got nothing out of it. There was no award, no recognition, no parade. But there was something more valuable, the certainty that I didn't let an injustice go by, that I didn't let one person be silenced by the will of another, that I didn't leave my sister stranded on an island because some crazy woman decided to play at power. And that, in the end, is what matters. Because if we start to accept that bridges can be destroyed on a whim, they'll soon think they can change everything. Our choices, our words, the way we live. But as long as there are people who stand up and say, "No, these cardboard structures will crumble." And the bridge, well, the bridge stands firm. And if you like this video, don't forget to leave your like and comment below.